Alright everyone, we have to talk about Joe Kennedy because he was of course the one chosen by the Democrats to sort of launch the response to Donald Trump's State of the Union. This is sort of typical. A lot of what happened last night was very, very typical and not surprising and actually a little bit boring at times. I thought the State of the Union was good. I thought Joe Kennedy's speech actually, by all perception accounts, remember perception over reality, the reality is it was totally vacuous, it didn't contain any substance, and it was basically an emotional appeal. As far as appealing to the further left, to the Democratic core, he did actually a really good job. Here's the problem with Joe Kennedy. Number one, he is basically attempting to be the next Barack Obama. That is, that I'm sure that he would love to run for the presidency. I'm not sure that his speech actually hit quite as good a tone as Obama was, when he was sort of in the lead up to running. But you got to remember, this is basically identical to what happened with Obama. Remember, he came out of nowhere. He was the dark horse candidate and wowed people by making a really good keynote speech. That's essentially why he was chosen as the nominee. That one speech was worth more than all of Hillary Clinton's acumen. She got shoved aside despite getting more delegates than he did. Joe Kennedy could easily be rigged into the position the same as Hillary was this last time and Obama before. Make no mistake, by the way. Unless there is an enormous discrepancy in talent or grassroots support, the Democrats essentially coronate their candidates. There's a strict pecking order. It's based on corporate moneyed interests. That's the way they do business. It's sort of like how the Republicans were doing business until, maybe after Romney, when that began to break down. They realized that simply attempting to buy an election no longer worked, and so they said, fuck it. Went populist. Then the Democrats, they tried to do what the Republicans were doing. We may see a double swing away from that in due time, and we may end up having like a massive corporate political lobby at the state level that doesn't even affect the presidential candidates so much anymore. It could happen. It could be the next great paradigm shift in American history. We're talking 15, 20 years down the road. And I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying it's the possible reaction to how I see politics possibly moving. But Joe Kennedy clearly was doing the same thing. Important speeches made, much to the huzzas of the left. Okay, that's the same as Obama. Comes out in a leisure suit, doesn't come out in a tuxedo. Labor-looking background, he's got like the automotive factory behind him. There's a reason that specific imagery was chosen. The Democrats' big concern is that Trump is going to run away with 2020 and that the Republicans may cling to the midterms and keep power in the House and Senate, making the Democrats look monumentally weak, primarily on economics and jobs. Therefore, the main focus for Joe Kennedy, the big point of his speech was, hey, yeah, the stock market's doing really well and everything, and I'm going to ignore the actual job numbers and wages rising and unemployment dropping and the Main Street effects of the good economy. I'm going to ignore the growth and everything. Just focus on, hey, stocks are rising, but it's not trickling down. It's just for the portfolios of corporate interests. The problem with making that argument, there are several problems. Here's why I don't think Joe Kennedy can be the next Obama. There are two fundamental reasons. Number one is situational. Number two is situational. The Democrats have maneuvered themselves situationally to be the corporate money party. Hillary Clinton was the corporate candidate. She was the candidate who was backed by the big banks, by the multinational firms, and by U.S. corporations. The small businesses were more of an even split, and Ma and Pa's little donations were going to Trump more, or to third parties in some cases. The far left abandoned the Democrats. Joe Kennedy can't get them back on board. He's not far left enough. His throwaway was, hey, we're going to legalize marijuana. Because you see what the Democrats are doing now. Now, they're trying to take advantage of Jeff Sessions being not well liked on the issue, and he is full of shit. I would go further than the Democrats would on marijuana among all other substances. They think that simply injecting this as a wedge issue is going to help them because they can contrast themselves with Sessions' policies. Trump may blindside them at some point, say, no, I don't agree with Jeff on this. We don't see eye to eye. I'm not going to have him, doing a total crackdown. I'm going to maintain the status quo, or it's a states issue. He might end up doing that, which would totally defang them. The problem is this. Joe Kennedy has an issue with who the sitting president is, but also the economy. That is, when George Bush was in office, and he wasn't the one running. You have a fresh crop of non-incumbent Republicans running against Barack Obama in 2000. It's not like John Kerry, who failed, or anything. There's no incumbent to run against. It was essentially a referendum on Bush. The problem was in the latter days of his presidency, in his last year, the economy begins to tank. We're embroiled in several wars that look unwinnable. It's clear he's not coherent, and you've got economic problems. The economy is a big thing. Right now, the economy's fine. The Democrats can say, well, it's only emboldening the rich. It's not going to matter, because the actual day-to-day lives of the average middle and lower class worker are going to at least be perceived of as better when they realize that they're paying $1,000 or $2,000 less in taxes, when they realize that costs on goods have dropped slightly, when they realize that more of their neighbors are not unemployed or underemployed. That's going to cause a groundswell of support for the incumbents, an anti-change sort of thing for anyone who primarily cares about the economy. There's the Rust Belt. That's the big concern in old industrial United States. Has nothing to do with the already blue coasts. It has nothing to do with the urban areas. The Democrats would be wise to mainly target Florida and Virginia, and to go after like that extra seat in Maine and make sure they shore up things in New Hampshire. Maybe Pennsylvania they could go for with higher turnout in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or something. The other Great Lakes states, they shouldn't even bother. Or they should go southwest and they should go pro-immigrant, which is another thing Joe Kennedy did. He's trying to make the argument, and this works really well in a Nevada or a New Mexico, of, well, the immigrants are part of our culture too, the city was built by immigrants are great. That's fine. The average voter has come to the conclusion that your applause for immigrants is at the expense of Americans. Making the togetherness argument would otherwise work, but Trump is going to countermand that very, very easily. He's already done it. He did it in the last election. Another problem is this. If simply saying Trump is bigoted and mean and we need, immigrants are great, if simply saying these things was a winning strategy, Hillary Clinton would be your president right now. So you've got a totally different economic situation. You've got a candidate, Joe Kennedy is not quite as charismatic as Barack Obama. There's one other big glaring difference between the two of them that really could be the death knell. The same young, especially millennial left wing that ushered Obama into office by abnormally high turnout in extremely large numbers. A lot of those people will not vote for a white Democratic candidate. I hate to say it, but a lot of those people think that it's racist if the Democrats run a white male anywhere on the ballot. They're not going to vote for Joe Kennedy. They're not going to be excited enough because that will no longer be one of the main wedge issues. It's almost, instead of a racial wedge issue, it's a nationality wedge issue. It morphs into just immigrant at large. The problem is immigrant and race aren't the same thing. Most people understand this, including some of those millennials. And if they see a white male versus a white male race, they say, well, the Democrats are no different. The Green Party, meanwhile, will be glad to offer them some Kamala Harris 2.0. They'll love it because they don't care about winning. They care about haranguing and growing the party. At this point, a smaller party can be more ideological, more puritanical. Larger parties have to do all the maneuvering and compromising and keep making sure to cobble together 51% of eligible voters that'll turn out for one of the two main parties. That's what they have to do. Smaller party doesn't have that problem. The Green Party can throw away whatever candidate it wants. The Libertarians can nominate they can have McAfee, they can have Peterson, they can have all sorts of people. Some of those people will rob votes probably from the Democrats, and it is the Democrats, I'm telling you, that are still vulnerable. Their lack of a coherent platform is partially now solved if they go the Joe Kennedy route. I don't think, though, he can win, but here's another big takeaway. The two people most likely to actually throw their hats in the ring are Joe Kennedy and Kirsten Gillibrand. Those are the two people right now that stand out from the rest of the flock. Joe Biden can't win. It's impossible. Hillary Clinton will not run again. Bernie Sanders will not run again. If he did, he'd probably drop dead of a heart attack on the campaign trail. He's too old for that sort of bullshit. Kamala Harris can never be nominated. The Democrats would end up losing California if they nominated Kamala Harris. Who else in the party is really qualified? Elizabeth Warren has burned away most of her capital. She has a reputation for being just too much of a Puritan. It's not what you want. You want someone who's younger and willing to jive and schmooze, and someone who's willing to maybe compromise their actual beliefs. Gillibrand already maneuvered herself into a position to run. I told you that at the time. She's taking up attack. She's trying to straddle that line between neoliberal, which is what she actually is. She's a corporate liberal, a Hillary Clinton-style candidate. And the Sandersite, she's trying to wine and dine them on board. She wants to grow a coalition to see her through a primary system within the Democratic Party. Joe Kennedy may try to do the same thing. I would say it's now likely after this that he runs. It's fairly likely. If he chooses not to, it'll be primarily because he's either expecting a VP slot or a major cabinet position, Secretary of State, something like that, you know, ambassador to Japan, something cushy, because he's expecting that, or he wants a little bit more state-level experience, congressional experience before he goes into executive politics. That's always possible as well. One of those two things, I think, could be the case. Those are the two people who right now stand out. There is no other viable Democratic candidate anyway. So you're stuck between Obama light or Gillibrand, who I don't think ultimately energizes as many of the Bernie fans as she would like. She didn't win a primary. You only need a very small sliver of them to vote for you to get a primary, but all you need is one technically viable far-left candidate to pull a Bernie Sanders and keep the party schismatic. They haven't struck that chord yet of togetherness within the Democratic Party, so how can they bring togetherness to the country? They can't. That's the problem. Their platform can't really... Saying togetherness doesn't work if you don't have togetherness within your own political movement. That's the problem that the Democrats currently have. So that would be basically my reading of Joe Kennedy. And now, of course, next video, the State of the Union. And I'll be reading out a little poll on that because, of course, I conducted that last night on Twitter. That's about all. Peace out.